showed me the bottom of the pipe and saw that it broke off cleanly, and now I'm getting a nice heat on the piece.
If you mash the two together, how do you get back to that nice flat bottom you just put on?
We break the punty off the bottom of the piece, leaving intact the original bottom I made, but with some of the punty left, and then we put it in the annealing oven. And after the piece is cooled, I grind and polish the bottom back to that original bottom, so that you get a nice ground and polished, finished, perfectly flat, clean bottom on it. But at this point we have to hold onto the glass, and there's no other way to hold on to the bottom of the piece without attaching the punty. Here you can see Matt is heating the front of the piece while I add some hot glass to the back of the punty as a little bit of insurance to keep that punty from breaking, from getting too cold, and also to add a little heat into the bottom of the piece. And the piece is so big now that I can't flash it, we say, all the way deep into the glory hole, because the glory hole's not big enough. Since these pieces, I've built a new glory hole that's another foot deeper, so I can reheat it all the way deep. But at this point, I can't get that punty into the reheating furnace or the glory hole, so I have to get it hot somehow, so we add a little hot glass to it. And now it's a process of heating the front of the piece so that I can get a nice graceful neck to pull off of it. But if I just heat the front and not the rest of it, it will get too cold and crack. So here's the tricky process of coaxing the neck out of the body of the piece, and you can see it's quite short and vase-like here, and I've heated it, and now I'm pulling the front of it with a pair of tweezers there, and it's sort of vase-like here, and also a nice form. But what I'm trying to do is capture the feeling of the hot glass when the piece is really moving, and so I pull the neck out and try to get a nice graceful curve as if to catch the feeling of the glass in its molten state. Here I'm using two torches again, one on the bottom to keep the bottom warm and one on the top to get that neck hot relative to the body of the piece, because the neck has to be quite molten so that I can pull it out and the body of the piece won't collapse. And it's sort of a slow, ungainly process that ends up with a quite graceful form. Here's another angle of that process. You see Matt standing and heating the bottom with a torch while I heat the front. So continue to slowly work the form out. The best way I can describe it is coaxing the neck out of the body of this piece. Here I've just brought it back from the heat and I'm coaxing out the neck again. I need a place or a way to grab the front of this so that I can start to pull it out. So here I'm necking in a portion with those jacks, and I'm going to cool that area so that it gives me a cold place to grab it where it's cold relative to the rest of the piece. Here I grab my diamond shears and I'm really pulling quite hard. And now that part that I've chilled, I break off. The rest of the neck is still quite hot. Now you can see the form there. It's starting to get elongated. Okay, so here I'm getting a final heat on the piece to do the pull on the neck, and I have to get it really hot, almost so hot that it will collapse, but not so hot that it does. It's always treading a real knife edge. And here we're almost there. You can see how hot the front of that is. It's glowing, and I'm using wet newspaper to shape that neck and to even out the heat. And I'm going to create another little cold neck on the front where I'm going to grab it. And you can see how hot it was. It just collapsed right down into a little flower on the end there. And I'm using that compressed air gun to chill that spot so that later when I heat it, I have a cool place to grab, relatively cold place to grab. I'm getting the final heat, and here we go. I'm bringing it back, and you can see it's really moving and flopping. And I start to set up the first curve on the neck, and I hand it off to Matt, and he's allowing it to sag even more. And he brings it up, and I grab it, put a little copper pipe in the end, and chill it with air so that it doesn't pull off. Right now, if I were to let it go, it would just flop and hit the ground, but it's just hot enough so that it's stretching out and it's cooling as I pull it, because as I pull it, it gets thinner and therefore it cools off faster. Got that curve, and now it's just cold enough so that it'll break. You can see that right here, I'm going to tap it and that sagging part will break, but you can see when I let it go, it's still sagged, and Matt turned it and caught that sag and brought it back to where I want it. And here I'm heating that end that I just broke off so that it's finished everywhere. There's no broken areas. This whole piece can be won or lost right in this move. If it's too hot, it'll pull out too thin. If it's too cold, it won't pull out. If I don't stretch it properly, I won't get a graceful curve on it. Now the trick is to get it off the punty and into the oven without breaking it, and get it in cold enough so that it won't sag, but hot enough so that it won't crack. And I've definitely discovered both ends of that spectrum. I just directed him to turn it over there and get the final little move I want on it, and then I clear the area so that he can walk through afterward. And then I take the torch and the pipe from him, and I get that flame going right up the piece and keep it hot. Actually, I'm allowing the rest of the piece to cool while the bottom I'm trying to keep hot, because if it goes in too hot, it will sag and slump. If it goes in too cold, of course, it will crack. So it's a real high wire act. Matt's gotten a hood on and some Kevlar gloves, and he's heated them up in front of the glory hole so that when he touches the piece, he doesn't heat shock them, so that he can pick this 1,000-degree plus sculpture up in his hands and put it into the custom-built oven that is just barely bigger than the piece, 6'9", and we're laying it on a bed of chalk there. And that's just regular playground chalk that cradles the piece and keeps it from getting scratched.
What temperature is the oven kept at?
Keep the oven at around 900 degrees. That allows it to stabilize and evenly cool the piece without letting it sag or get slumped.
How long does the piece stay in there?
It stays in overnight, and it cools off overnight. So we make the piece during the day, turn the oven down overnight, and it comes out in the morning at about 100 degrees. And there you can see the true color of the piece and how it barely fits in that oven. Wow, what a beauty. This is what I do usually when I come into this shop. I take them out of the oven and wipe the chalk off of them and make sure there's no cracks or imperfections or scratches. Make sure the piece didn't slump or sag. Look at the color, look at the decoration, make sure there's no flaws. I'm very pleased with this one.
Once it comes out of the oven, is there anything else that needs to be done?
Well, at this point, the piece is finished, and the hot working aspect of it is finished, and now it needs to be ground and polished. The bottom is still jagged from breaking it off the punty, and so I need to grind and polish the base. And then, of course, I sign and date each piece. Even though it looks like a seamless thing, we did this over 2 days, and I made 2 fairly identical pieces, and they became, the final sculpture was the pair of them. I make these as a pair, and this is the first one that I made, and then later on this same day we'll make the second one. Later you'll see the final sculpture pair. I make them as pairs because I think the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Each piece in itself is a work of art, but together they're more than their individual selves. They create an implied emotion and feeling where they intertwine and interact as a pair and get a lot of anthropomorphic human feeling out of them.
I like these so much I haven't sold them yet. I'm having a lot of trouble letting them go.
Thank you, Jeremy, for inviting us into your studio to see you work. The sculptures are truly beautiful. One last question. How did you get started in glass blowing?
I've been blowing glass since 1987. I've been making these pieces since '96, but not in their present form. They haven't reached this scale and this subtlety until the last couple of years. And they started out much smaller and much more of a happy accident, actually. I was playing around with some different colors that I had left over from another project, and I combined them, and one of the colors was hard and stiff, and the other color was soft and really mobile, and the form that I was making did not want to stay straight, so I allowed it to do what it wanted to do, which was to bend, and as I pulled a neck out of it, it bent one way, and then I bent it back the other, and created this really pleasing, beautiful, bird-like form. But the color was quite flower-like, so Birds of Paradise seemed like the natural name for the series, since Birds of Paradise is a flower and a bird. I started blowing glass at a school called Santa Monica College down in LA, where I'm from, and it was an elective at the school where I was going, and I was just taking it for fun because I wanted to be an industrial designer. I took the course and was immediately enamored with it, fell in love with it, wanted to do it to the exclusion of all my other studies, and sort of followed my nose and took a job in LA working at a glass factory, and then came up to the Bay Area and studied at California College of Arts and Crafts, which is a 4-year school. And during that time I also worked at another factory up here. And then after school I left and went to Italy, where I did an apprenticeship with a very fine Venetian master named Pino Signoretto, which I was very lucky to work with him, and did a short apprenticeship with him, and then came back here and started my shop. At that point I'd been blowing glass for 5 years and wanted to give myself a shot to have a business, and had no idea what I was going to do, and just came here and found a shop and built it and put it together and started blowing glass, and it's been a wonderful odyssey and been quite successful, actually. I don't know what else to say.
Sounds good.